Now let's continue our intonation. In the previous sections, we talked about the sense group and the information unit, and then we talked about the information focus and nucleus. Now we come to the last section, tones. Tones. And this is the most familiar thing to most of the students. Look at the sentence. But there are borders and there are borders. What are the tones? When I come to the nucleus, I say there are borders mainly for, but a little bit rise here. Very subtle, a little rise here. There are borders and there are borders, borders for. We hear the for, and this for is the so-called tone. Why is the tone important? Why is it important? Now we have to talk about the difference between English and Chinese. We often observe that English is different from Chinese because we can perceive or we can hear a lot of ups and downs of utterances. 英语的语调上下起伏比较明显，汉语的语调相对来说呢比较平一些。English is a language of intonation, so if you don't know intonation, and then it's impossible for you to understand the English language. Okay, then to understand the intonation, first of all, we need to understand the intonation units, the sense group, boundaries, and then attitudes. The intonation units will show us sense group, will show us the boundaries between the sense groups. And at the same time, the intonation unit or the nucleus or the tones will show us the attitude of the speaker. And compared with English, Chinese is more level. That means intonation does not play a significant role in the communication of ideas. It does not mean that there is no intonation at all in Chinese. There is. However, it does not play a significant role. And then Chinese students' problem. In the previous chapter, we say that then one of the major problems among Chinese students is the misuse of the English rhythm. And now, the second biggest problem is intonation. We say that in Chinese students speaking, it's often toneless. It's toneless. There is no tone at all. What do we mean? Because in the speaking, we cannot sense the boundaries of sense groups. At the same time, it's very difficult to identify, to find out or figure out the speaker's attitude or general tendency in meaning. Look at this sentence. It's a long one. Well, the Chinese students will say, a fairly recent trend in choosing a name has meant that there are now generations of young people named after musicians, film stars, and even designer clothes labels. And the Chinese students will say, well, it's easy to understand. It's easy to understand because you have known the meaning in the first place. If you do not have previous, if you're not in a situation, or if you do not have the previous knowledge of what you're going to say, it would be very difficult to understand the spoken English as I presented previously. And then the English way to show this is by virtue of intonation unit and the intonation unit, nucleus, and tones. Listen to me. Pay attention to the boundaries. Pay attention to the nucleus, and pay attention to the tones I used. A fairly recent trend in choosing a name has meant that there are now generations of young people named after musicians, film stars, and even designer clothes labels. Listen again. A fairly recent trend in choosing a name has meant that there are now generations of young people named after musicians, film stars, and even designer clothes labels. Basic tones. How many tones are there in English? Many, many. But then we have some basic tones. This part is the most familiar one to you, and you all know the basic tones. However, most students could only use one or at most two. Then we have 4, rise, 4 rise, and level. And then in 4, we also have high 4, low 4, high rise, low rise. Okay, I know that many people would complain. These things are too abstract. What do they mean? Let me give you an example. Okay, if someone asks you, do you like this city? The answer could be just one word, but then in different tones, they mean quite differently. It could be yes, high 4, so you know whether you like it. It could be low 4, it could be yes. Do you like the city? Yes. Yes. A little bit more serious. And then, do you like the city? Yes. Something like that. I don't understand why you asked this question. Or, what did you say? Next. Do you like the city? Yes. So what? What do you want to know? Then, do you like the city? 4 rights will take yes. What does that mean? Like or does not like. And then level. Do you like the city? Yes, yes. That's level. What do all these basic tones mean? 4. This is the most frequently used one, and especially frequently used in the British model. And a 4 tone signals completion. That means a full stop. That means the end of the sentence, the end of a statement. It can mean certainty, or it can be used in WH questions. Look at these examples. The tone. Now listen to me and try to feel how the tones are made, and then how a 4 tone sounds like. Number 1, I like it very much. I like it very much. Think about that yes. The same thing as much. Number 2, I report you to the manager. I report you to the manager. Ma. 3, go and see your doctor. Go and see your doctor. So we can see there's a completion, completion, completion. And this is an imperative. It's a kind of suggestional order. Number 4, how does it work? How does it work? WH question. And number 5, it can also be used in yes or no questions. For example, you like it, don't you? Yes. Then we say, don't you? You don't say that you like it, don't you? Can you say it, you like it, don't you? Yes, you can. But in that case, you're not very sure about the answer. If you say then you like it, don't you? That means then you're pretty sure about the answer, and that is a yes. A rise tone. A rise tone often shows continuity. What does that mean? That means the sentence is not finished. So sometimes inside the sentence or between the boundaries of sentence groups in one sentence, we're going to take a rise. Or it can show uncertainty. You're not very sure about something. Or it is often used in yes or no questions. And it also used for repetition or clarification or disbelief. Now let's look at these examples. Now, number one, I'm going to the shop to get some food and then go home. Now pay attention to this shop and food. That means I'm not finished. I'm still continuing. So it's not finished. It's continuity. I'm going to the shop to get some food and then go home. Number two, perhaps you'd like to go. It's a kind of inquiry, or uncertainty or inquiry. So ask for. So the speaker inquires whether you'd like to go or not. Number three, do you take cream in your coffee? Do you take cream in your coffee? All right. This is a kind of like uncertainty or for clarification. It's used for clarification. Do you take cream or not? Next. Taking up what? Taking up what for repetition. Very obvious for repetition. And finally, we have really? Really? You did? You did? That's for disbelief. Disbelief. A full rise is also very frequently used in the English language. However, now our students don't use it very often. Many of them don't use it at all. A full rise signals continuation, and especially it is used within one sentence, but then between the boundaries of sentence groups. So it shows non-finality. It often shows the meaning, it often indicates the meaning of yes, but. Yes, but. Examples. Number one, private enterprise is always efficient. Pay attention to this enterprise. Enterprise, for, rise, to show an incompletion. Number two, presumably, he thinks he can. Presumably, he thinks he can. Now this presumably, for, rise. Next is a question. Would you like to go to the party with me this evening? Yes, I'd love to, but my homework is due tomorrow. What does that mean? I'd love to. So the speaker intends to express the attitude that he or she loves to do, but couldn't. So, yes, but. I'd love to, but. A level tone. The level tone is not important. And also, it shows unimportant information, or it shows that the speaker is uninterested. But it's important in reading aloud. And often, when we tell the story, and the reporting phrases are spoken in the level tone. Let me show you some examples. Look at this sentence. Said my mother. The reporting phrase is spoken in a level tone. This is done in order to distinguish between the quotation and the reporting phrase. Now listen, the reporting phrase is spoken in a level tone, and the level tone sounds like this. Deep in the middle of the woods, said my mother, it's a place where the king of the pumpkins lives. Listen again. So you can figure out the boundaries between the quotation and then the reporting phrase. Deep in the middle of the woods, said my mother, it's a place where the king of the pumpkins lives. Another example. But pumpkins live in fields, not in forests, I said to my mother. Again, I said to my mother. So you can distinguish between the quotation and the reporting phrase. Remember that when the reporting phrase comes in the middle of the quotations or at the end, and we're going to use a level tone. Another example would be this. Here is a question. What are your duties? And the answer is this. I could say, well, collecting papers, writing reports, receiving visitors, that sort of thing. Now, try to feel the difference in attitude between this version and the version I'm going to give in next, the next version. So, what are your duties? Well, collecting papers, writing reports, receiving visitors, that sort of thing. And you can hear that the second version shows that the speaker is quite uninterested, not happy, not pleased. So that's level tone. There are important rules in the selection of the basic tones. Remember, then adopt a full tone at the end of a statement, and especially in reading aloud. And the second, use a rise tone to indicate incompleteness or continuity or uncertainty. So then, a for at the end of a statement. Rise to indicate incompleteness, continuation, or uncertainty. Look at examples. Before we come to the example, remember that then these things are not accepted in English, toneless, and the force all the way. And all these phenomena are often observed among Chinese learners of English. Toneless, that means then syllable-timed rhythm. Syllable-timed rhythm, you tend to stress every syllable. Force all the way. Force all the way, that means the random pauses. If a person read this part like this, Shakespeare told us that a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. But is that true? Are names important? Are you happy with the name that you were given as a baby? And how do you choose a name for your own children when they come along? And this is toneless, the force all the way. Very typical Chinglish. Toneless, force all the way. What are the features of an intoned English? Intoned English, first, regular pauses, right pauses within the sense group or intonation unit. No pauses should be made within that unit, first. And second, very clear perceptual features made on the nucleus, so we can see longer, higher, and louder. There may be different ways to read this paragraph aloud. I'll give you one option. Look at this. Listen to me. Shakespeare told us that the rose, by any other name, would smell less sweet. But is that true? Are names important? Are you happy with the name that you were given as a baby? And how do you choose a name for your own children when they come along? Again, Shakespeare told us that a rose by any other name would smell less sweet. But is that true? Are names important? Are you happy with the name that you were given as a baby? And how do you choose a name for your own children when they come along? Okay, we've talked about basic tones, and among the tones we've introduced, and the 2, 4, and rise are the most important. Remember that if you take a 4 tone, you want to signal finality, certainty, and liveliness. If you adopt a rise tone, and you want to signal continuation, uncertainty, and inquiry. Summary. So we discussed how to divide the stream of speech into the intonation units. That is, we're based on sense groups. And then next, we discussed how to select a nucleus. We select a nucleus based on our decision on the information focus. Finally, we discussed how to select a tone, a 4 or rise, and they have different meanings. More details will be given in Chapter 3, Sentence Stress and Weak Form. But before we leave here, I want to emphasize one thing. Remember, in the first part, that's the pause. Second part and third part is the signal for the come, for the approach of a pause. And that part should be prominent. And the prominency is embodied in the pronunciation of the sound as louder, as longer, and also a big change in pitch. Thank you.